Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
So I was at my grandparents' when I was about 15. I remember waking up and not being able to fall back to sleep. So I sat on Facebook on my phone for a bit. It was dead quiet in the house, and any loud noises such as footsteps were picked up by the dogs, and they would bark the house down. But as I started to hear footsteps on the floorboard down the hallway, and the dogs were not making any noise, I came up with the theory that everyone in the house was murdered, and they were coming for me next. I remember feeling the most intense fear I've ever felt, as I heard the footsteps make their way down the hallway, towards the entrance in my room. As I lay there, a man casually walked into the room and stood at the end of my bed. He wasn't facing me, though. He was facing the window to my right and just staring out of it. I couldn't see the top half of his body as I was on the bottom bed of a bunk bed, but I could distinguish that he was a tall and stocky man, almost inhumane. The whole time I was frozen in fear, and all I could hear was his deep breathing, like he had stage 5 emphysema. After a few minutes of standing at my bed, he turned around, and I could hear footsteps going down the hallway. Then silence. I built the courage after around 15 minutes of listening out for any noises to finally run into my grandparents' room and tell them there was a man in the house. They got up, turned all the lights on, searched the house, and there was nothing or no one. None of my family believe me to this day.
Be 16-year-old me a few years ago in summer, just sleeping as usual every night. Wake up at exactly 3:17 a.m. OK.jpg. Go back to sleep. Same thing happens the next night at the same time. And the next night, and every night for a whole week. Time is always 3:17 a.m. Screw this .webem. Decide to try to stay up as long as possible. Lights out, in bed, pretending to sleep. 2:14 a.m. Hear something tapping. Tapping gets louder until it sounds like nails clicking on wood. Something is at my desk near the foot of my bed, but too scared to look. Feel a weight pressing down on my mattress before finally falling asleep. Wake up and feel really quite ill. 5:30-ish am finally. There's a song playing in my head like an earworm. Feels familiar, but I'd never heard anything like it before in my life. Singing is in a foreign language, still not identified. Get this strange spiritual feeling whenever the song comes to mind, like there's something greater always watching. Turns out I have a bunch of songs that sound similar, both with and without singing, floating in my head. I've had a few more feelings that something was in my room since, over the last few years, but that was the first. About a year ago, I went on holiday to Bali and noticed the gamelan music there sounded very similar to these songs, though the language was different, as were a lot of the instruments. I still can't get the songs out of my head and occasionally sing them to myself.
I've got one hell of a story. The year is 2003. I sleep upstairs and my bedroom has a window that faces out front. Parents always said I had a vivid imagination, would have dreams almost every night. Many of them I would be out of my body. One night I have this dream. My room was rectangular, with my door and window being on opposite ends of the room, both the shorter sides. In my dream, I am in the corner of the room opposite of the window, near the ceiling, watching myself sleep. Out my window I can see a tree branch moving back and forth. As I'm watching it, a shadowy figure comes to the window and sees me in bed. It's made out of shadow, darker than black, but it has bright, piercing yellow eyes. All of a sudden it starts pounding on the window. The glass is cracking, but it doesn't make a sound. Eventually it shatters and the shadow creeps inside, crawling at first, but then it stands over my body and it reaches for the covers. Suddenly it snaps. Its head to where I am watching in the corner of the room. The eyes seem to squint in anger as it recognizes me, and it starts running towards me. It gets within 5 feet, and I wake up in a cold sweat. I have this recurring nightmare at least 3 times a week. 2 years later, we moved for my dad's work and the dream stopped. I'm older now and I'm going to high school. One night I go to bed and fall asleep instantly. I am greeted by a new version of the dream, in my new room. This time it can see me right away. The entire room is dark, but I can see the shadow even clearer. It's at least 7 feet tall, and it's desperately trying to break in. I end up having this nightmare again and again, but I never tell anyone about it. At school a few weeks later, a girl I was friends with said she got me a present. I opened it up and it was a dream catcher. She said it was good luck, so I decided to hang it up. That night I had the nightmare again, but this time my room is completely white, like a sketch almost. The only black are the lines of the walls and windows. I see the shadow again, but this time it seems held back. It breaks through the window, but this time I grab it by the arms and throw it out a second window, and I climb out the other into an empty white. After that, I never had the nightmare again. I chalked it up to a weird imagination and didn't think about it for a long time. Fast forward to 6 months ago, I was alone in my apartment on the phone with a friend. I remember starting to talk about the nightmare. He was the first person I told. After that, it's all a bit hazy. Apparently, that night I started talking about how I could still feel him, the shadow still, and specifically referred to it as he. The dreams come back, but this time they are always different. I walk through my house in what feels like pitch black, and the shadow is already inside, watching me. Other times he is outside trying to open my doors. In one dream I heard someone running across my roof and jumping off the back. While all of this is happening, I start to hear things while I'm awake. Around 2 in the morning I start hearing scratching noises by one of my windows, like a claw being dragged against it. When I'm on the phone, friends ask if I have people over, because they can hear someone else talking. I started to think I was going crazy, until my sister and her boyfriend came over and they heard the same noises. Sister is a Wiccan and says she feels some kind of demonic energy, and she wants to help. The next day she comes back with little bags that are supposed to protect me. They hang over each window and door in my home. Burns some herbs and pours some mix of ingredients around my house. Can't remember what all she used because I was skeptical of magic shit. After that, the noises stop, the dreams stop. The house just feels generally safer. I talked to my friend again. He seemed to believe a lot more than I would have thought, and said he had seen yellow eyes like I had earlier on in life. We start talking about more of this kind of shit, and notice we have a lot of similarities. We only talk about it during the day because he feels uneasy like something is watching him at night. 2 months go by and I see the Shadow Man again. He stands at 8 feet tall now, and I can hear his voice in my head, promising power in exchange for loyalty and death in response to refusal. I check the bags around my house. All of the bags at the back of the house are on the floor. I start stressing out. I live alone, so I was worried I might have done it in my sleep. I put them back up and go back to bed. The bags come back down 3 more times. One day, my landlord thinks I am at work. I lied because I didn't want her to be at the house. While I'm in bed, I hear the back door open. I grab my gun and peek out. It's my landlord. She came in, took the bags down, and left. That's where I'm at now. I haven't asked her about it, but I don't know what to do, or why she even does it.
Before 5. Living up in Mount Shasta. The neighbor kids are a few years older. Go over for a play date. It's the early 90s and we're in the mountains. We're unsupervised as shit. Neighbors are 2 brothers. One closer to my age, the other a year or 2 older. Oldest brother says, "Hey, Anons, let's go in a woods." Her okay, oldest Anon. "You're the boss." Hop an old wooden fence. Go a bit in a woods. Couldn't have been that far. Come to a small clearing. Memory goes blank, losing several hours of time. I remember running back home, hopping the fence, leaving the other 2 boys in the woods. I remember feeling upset, afraid I'd be in trouble, but even then the events of the clearing were hazy at best. Never played with those boys again. So either I was attacked, we saw a dead body, or some spoopy shit went down. I have no way of saying. But despite this black hole in my memory, the surrounding events and my feelings about it afterwards have always stuck in my mind in a foreboding way. I'm not sure about the attack angle though, because I uncovered a bunch of other memories regarding that from just a few years later. You'd think I'd have unlocked this event too. Anyway, that's the best I got right now. Sorry for not lying and said we all turned into Wendigos or something.
Be around 4 to 5 years old, in my bed trying to sleep. Suddenly, I'm completely paralyzed. Strange bassy music starts playing, a wicked-looking disembodied face. Imagine an Aztec sundial, but made of wood. Comes out of the wall and starts yelling incoherent nonsense sprinkled with the occasional petty insult. Refers to itself as Roroledo, spelling. I'm scared shitless and can barely get any sleep. This keeps happening over and over for weeks, maybe even months. Keep quiet about it because I don't want my friends and family to think I'm nuts. At the time, we'd get regular checkups from the school nurse to make sure we didn't have head lice. During one such inspection, the nurse notices that I look incredibly tired. I break my silence and start describing the aforementioned night terrors. She snaps at me, telling me to cut it out because this shit isn't funny. Turns out she's heard the exact same story from a dozen or so other kids.
I'm not much of a believer in anything supernatural. Fedora wearer here. By about 2 months ago, something pretty weird went down while I was drinking. I've been brushing it off like it was the alcohol, but always have that creeping feeling. Be me 22. Drive down to Delaware for Thanksgiving with Senpai. Big family, pretty huge house, don't have a clue how old it is. The night before Thanksgiving, me and my cousins drinking some beer in the living room chilling. About 1 a.m. me and my other dude cousin, the only ones left, start heading upstairs. Dark as shit cause cousins turned all the lights out, using phone lights. Walking past the bathroom, I hear some dude coming down the halls. See dude and me and cousin move out the way. Wait, what? JPG. Cousin asks, who the hell is that old dude? Look back and see the bathroom door is locked now. We go look into the bathroom. See the old dude walking towards the window. Opens a locked window, gets up on a ledge about to walk off. Cousins scream at the top of his voice to not jump. Old dude looks back. My face when it has no eyeballs, jumps out the window. Cousins who weren't awake came running to the bathroom. Dude cousin is looking out the window for a body. We don't see shit. He's spazzing out. I'm sweating. Chick cousins asking WTF. Explain what went down. They walked us to our rooms because clearly we had too much to drink. Never talked about it again.
Just the other night I had a pretty distressing dream and thought I woke up. Had this real odd feeling that something bad or negative was going to happen. As I turned to face the right side of my bed, this kind of lanky figure rose up beside me and sort of lunged. I'm not too sure how to explain it. It essentially just repositioned its arm to hug me. The only spooky thing about it was that it had this kind of distorted, chalky white face. Anyway, I immediately turned away and then immediately awoke in that position. Surely just a spooky night terror, but the only eerie thing is that my younger brother had seen the exact same thing while properly conscious. I used to see the Hat Man when I was younger, and he and I shared a room together. I'd get up to see who it was, and he'd immediately turn away and move off. By the time I reached where he was standing, he'd be at the tops of our stairs. Just found it a little spooky. He described seeing exactly what I saw, but yes, nothing that special.
When recovering from a surgery, I was laying on a couch, unable to fall asleep, for days due to the pain. After about 50 hours of little to no sleep, I started seeing figments of light. They first started in the corner of my eye, but before long, I saw them floating around the room. I thought they were just a side effect from what little pen medicine I was given, until one of them came close to me and sat on my chest and emitted an unnatural scream. I was unable to breathe and cried out for my life, unable to move. I thought I was going to die until the couch cushion started to slide off, allowing me to flip onto the floor and breathe again. I blacked out for a few seconds while my wife came over to see what was wrong. I don't tell this to my therapist because I don't want to be called a drug addict or get put on antipsychotics. This is my one and only experience with anything paranormal. I'm a fully functioning human being with a job, a house, and a family.
Middle of August 2017. Get up in the morning and have a quick meal in anticipation of another day at my shitty factory job. It's raining outside, so I decided to pay a quick visit to my grandma's apartment. It's just a few floors downstairs from mine, and she gave me the key so I could water the plants and keep my stuff there while she's away for the summer. And grab a raincoat. No time to waste. It's already 7:40 and I have to be at work by 8. I unlock the door, enter the apartment, and walk towards the large walk-in closet, which is located straight ahead. Out of the corner of my eye, I spot a dark, vaguely human figure, no more than 3 feet tall, standing in the room to my right. Immediately turn my head to look at it. See nothing but a plain, unoccupied room. Next second, my phone starts ringing. Answer the call without looking. It's my boss asking me if I'm okay and why I'm not at work. I answer that I'm fine and point out it's not 8 o'clock yet. The boss asks if I'm drunk and tells me to look at my watch. Take a good look at my wristwatch. It's 2 in the afternoon. Quickly make up some bullshit excuse about a family emergency and get my ass to the factory for what's left of the day. End up in the management shit list and resign a few weeks later.
Be me. Be 6 years old. I awakened in the dark of my room feeling panicked. I searched the shadows around my room that are cast by the nightlight out of habit. The darkness is thick around the light. I grow increasingly anxious and fearful. I can no longer stand the fear I feel, and I swing my legs over the bed. I step forward into the darkened hallway towards my brother's room. The moonless night swallowed all the light in the house, leaving a Stygian vacancy in the house. I slip into my brother's room and onto his bed. I stare out the doorway into the tar-black hallway full of fear. I tug at the blanket my brother has wrapped himself in. I notice a glow. The glow is pale white emerging from the living room. I think it's Dad checking the locks like he does every night. The glow comes around the doorway. Pale, luminescent fingers reach around the doorway. They are too long, bony, and end in long fingernails. My heart stops. I squeak, unable to scream, and I stare impotently. The fingers grip the wood of the doorframe and the head emerges from the darkness. The bald head glows, but where there should have been eyes, there is nothing. Not darkness, nothing. The creature stares into me, cocking its head. The fingers on the doorframe begin tapping impatiently. Rhythmically and patiently, the creature drags its fingernails across the wood, producing a grating scratching. The cold realization that it wants me to run fills me. I remember my grandma teaching me prayers. I snap out of my stupor and try to wake my brother. He does not stir. I yank a blanket free from him and cover myself. I began to pray the Our Father, Hail Mary, and Guardian Angel prayer. I prayed until I fell asleep. The next day, I woke up and found scratches on the doorframe. Years later, my parents admitted they believed me but didn't want to scare me. I still sleep with a flashlight, cross, and weapon 21 years later.
This isn't the most exciting story, but it's the one that happened to me. I'm not making any of this up. If I did, it'd be more interesting. Living with friends on an island in the marsh near Savannah, Georgia. Riding home with my roommate, he tells me that the day before, he and a mutual friend saw a deer in the road that disappeared when they got close. I don't believe this shit, making fun of him. We pull onto the causeway that crosses the marsh to the island. I know this is a cliche, but there in the middle of the road is a man with white hair, white skin, and white clothes. My friend turns his brights on and the dude suddenly vanishes. I didn't acknowledge what I had seen at first. Then my friend says, "Did you just see that?" Neither of us were on drugs or had any mental illnesses that cause hallucinations, and the probability of us both having the same hallucination at the same time for no reason is too small to consider.
Not too spoopy. Be in Alabama with my aunt. Go to the cemetery at night to see a meteor shower. Going through a rough time, and I love space, so this gonna be good. Waiting around, there's some railroad nearby. Train one passes. We're using a flashlight to read some tombstones, talking about my late uncle. Just freaky stuff that they experienced in their old home, Blackwell. Train 2 passes. I start hearing this distant whistling noise. Get a headache. We chill on this bench that's facing a rather large tombstone. I'm on the very edge. So far, nothing spoopy, but I'm on my toes with jitters. Train 3 passes. The light of the train hits the large tombstone. We both see this misty, foggy, cloudy figure. It's hunched over and runs toward the bench. NASCAR, turns around on my side of the bench, disappears into the darkness, and tries to rule out normal causes. Train 4 passes. Figure does not appear. Nothing else spoopy happens all night. We pack up and go home. Next day, Aunt tells me about this Native American legend that the figure reminded her of. Something about a guy with a flute. Description fits 100%. The flute was the whistle noise I heard. We head back to investigate. Bench was made by a Native American man for his dead Native American wife. It was sitting in front of their grave. It's not that spooky, but it startled a 15-year-old me.
An authentic Brabantian folktale. I heard it from my granny, though in a slightly different version, my granny's version. A farmer had a son that wasn't completely right in the head. The boy would steal, get into fights, molest girls, and it was even believed he had killed an old widow living alone in a cottage. The villagers would beat him up, and he was forbidden from entering the town and the church. His father, who still loved his son, stopped going to church as well. As the boy grew older, he mellowed out somewhat, but the people still claimed he went out at night to cause mischief. One day, while going around at night, doing God knows what, the devil appeared to him. He offered to drown away all his sorrows and pains and make him normal again, only he had to take a small girl and cut open her neck at the old oak in the forest. The boy kidnapped a small child from a nearby farmhouse and did what the devil instructed. The devil appeared to him and said, "Good. You have now taken the road of no return. Before next midnight you will drown." The boy panics, and next evening he goes to the local church. The priest first wants to turn him away, but after he breaks down sobbing and explains everything, he agrees to help him. The priest and boy stay up the entire night in the church, praying and talking. For the first time in his life, the boy genuinely confesses his sins. An hour before midnight, it starts raining violently, like it has never rained before. The entire church is shaking. Suddenly, the rain completely stops. When the priest's pocket watch shows it's midnight, the boy howls in delight. "Curse you and your church, and curse Christ, I have beaten the devil." The boy then runs outside. The priest, after being dazed, follows him. Just before the priest walks outside, he hears the bells of the city's cathedral in the distance. His pocket watch was off, just by a minute. When he goes outside, he finds the boy drowned in a puddle. Another fun story I got from my granny. One day there was a farmer named Tunis. Tunis was a pig of a man, but with a good sense of humor, and everyone liked him. Everyone except the local sheriff. Every time Tunis went to the city market, the sheriff would be annoyed at the stupid jokes Tunis was telling him. This went on for 5 years, when one year, out of spite, the sheriff demanded Tunis pay and extra sheep tax for insulting him. Tunis got angry, grabbed the sheriff by the local, and had to pay an extra fine. Angry, he decided he would get back his money, so he started thinking of ways to smuggle a sheep into the market without paying any taxes. The first year he hid a sheep in a barrel. The sheriff found that one out. The second year, he hid a sheep in a fake bottom on his cart. That one didn't work so well. The third year, he dressed up like a sheep like his fat sister, but alas, that failed as well, and every time he had to pay a fine. Tunis, for the first time in his life, really started thinking, how could he smuggle a sheep into the city? This went on for months until one day, he awoke laughing from his sleep. He was going to dress up the sheep, like a sheep. So, next season, he did just that. He arrived at the city entrance. The sheriff approached him and immediately started searching his cart. Nothing in the barrels, no double floor. That's his fat sister's all right. The sheriff approaches Tunis and says, "I see you have no more tricks up your sleeves. That is a tax for 12 sheep. No, Tunis says, "I have 13 sheep." The sheriff laughs. "Nice try, Tunis, but that's not a sheep. That's no doubt your brother, or the neighbor's boy dressed up as a sheep." Tunis looks him in the eyes and says, "No, sheriff, you gotta believe me. That's a sheep. I dressed up like a sheep in order to trick you." "Yes," he says, "I put a fake sheep's mask on the sheep, put a sheep's pelt on the sheep's back, and put fake hooves on the sheep." The sheriff looks him in the eyes and says, Tunis, this is really a joke, even though I think it is funny. You want me to charge you for an extra sheep so you can take legal action, don't you? No, Sheriff, Tunis said. I swear that is a sheep dressed up like a sheep. Right, and those aren't two legs hidden below the tarp there. Those are fake legs, right? Now you are a very smart man, Sheriff, but those are really two fake legs under that tarp, and I'm telling you, this is indeed a sheep dressed up like a sheep. The sheriff grumbles. He has had enough. Tunis, he says, you will pay a tax on these 12 sheeps and not a sheep more. Well, all right, Sheriff, if you insist. So when Tunis got to the market, he called all the farmers together. He boys, guess what? I finally was able to smuggle in a sheep. Everyone looked at him in surprise and told him how he did it. Simple. I just dressed up one of the sheep as a sheep, and the sheriff thought I was fooling him. I literally outright stated that it was a sheep dressed up like a sheep, and he didn't believe me. That same Tunis and the sheriff were called to the mayor's office for a quick talk. The major promised he would prosecute if Tunis stopped his practical joke. Tunis agreed, for he had won over the sheriff.
I got one, be very young native boy, around 4 or 5. Live in woods not too far from the reservation. Live in a house that has a ground-level extension. Nighttime, maybe around 10 p.m. Parents and family members are all upstairs in the living room, get hungry, and decide to go downstairs into the extension where the kitchen is. Shortly after entering the kitchen, I see 2 white figures that appear to be children standing in the middle of the room smiling at me. One is a boy and the other a girl. They look like twins. Hair all over my body stands up and feels a sense of dread. Immediately run as fast as possible upstairs while screaming. Parents noticeably freaked out. Tell them I saw 2 ghosts downstairs. Parents do what they can to calm me down from the shock of what I've seen. Dad and uncle go downstairs to find nothing. Years go by and I learn that the house and area around it is notorious for being super haunted. That experience is clear in my mind like it happened yesterday, and it's always made me question if spirits and ghosts were real or not, because how else could you explain something like that? I've been told kids are more susceptible to seeing spirits, both good and evil, as my little brother saw something similar, except it was a black figure and seemed to resemble an old man, if I recall correctly.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.